Welcome back to the OSM channel. In today's video, I'd like to share with you several tools that will help to allow you and your family to survive the collapse of civilization. A bit of a dark theme video. I hate to make videos like this, but it's important to note and understand we have built a civilization that is dependent on electronic devices, and I feel that one of the greatest threats to modern civilization as we know it is something known as an EMP, an electromagnetic pulse. Now, what is an EMP? How would one occur, and what are the potential consequences?
An electromagnetic pulse is a surge
of electromagnetic energy that can damage or disable electronic systems. How can it happen? EMPs can be caused by either a natural event, like a geomagnetic disturbance, GMD, or by an intentional attack such as a high-altitude nuclear explosion. Why is it a concern? Modern society is highly reliant on electronic systems, and a widespread EMP event could disrupt critical infrastructure like power grids, communication networks, and financial systems, potentially leading to widespread chaos and societal disruption. Take a minute, think about that, let that sink in. Let's take a moment to reflect on some of the electronics that the average person uses every day. Electronic coffee maker, that has a circuit board, it's powered by electricity. How are you going to get to work? Well, you start your car that is operated by a central computer system. An EMP could potentially fry that. You go to work, all the computers at work, well, they wouldn't work anymore. What if you need to fuel up your car? Well, those fuel stations are powered by electricity, but additionally, all those fuel dispensing pumps, they have circuit boards and circuitry, could potentially fry all those. After work, if you go to the supermarket, they keep a lot of that food fresh by placing the food in coolers or freezers, which are powered by electricity. And all of those coolers are smart. You know, they instruct the compressor when to turn on and shut off to keep the temperature where they want it set at. So all those electronics could potentially be fried. So I think you get the idea here. Without question, an EMP would be an absolute disaster for modern civilization. Unfortunately, many people would perish, and it would take years, many years, for us to try and rebuild back our civilization. Now, the only group of people that I think would do all right would be the Amish and very primitive cultures. Now, thankfully, the chances of an EMP happening are quite low. However, the possibility remains. Now, it's completely up to you whether you want to try and prepare for such an event. If you do want to try and get ahead of the ball and prepare for such an event, let's think about some of the key things we need to survive, right? We need food, we need shelter, we need water. We also would need a source of fire, and I would also say we need some type of protection to protect ourselves and our families. The tools I'm about to share with you today primarily focus on shelter and fire. The tools in front of you will help to allow you to harvest lumber, collect firewood, and build shelters. So if we can no longer acquire gasoline, and or if we have one of those modern steel M-tronic saws that have some type of circuit board in there, well, those are going to be garbage. How are we going to cut down trees? Because we're not going to be able to use a chainsaw. Well, what I want you to start looking for are old school crosscut saws. There is a difference between modern crosscut saws and vintage crosscut saws. All the saws I have, thankfully, are vintage. The reason vintage crosscut saws are superior is because where the teeth are on the saw is actually a bit thicker. And as you go towards the opposite side of the teeth on the saw, the metal gets thinner. And what this does, this actually reduces drag, right? Like, think about it. The teeth are the widest part. It's going to cut a nice wide cut, nice wide kerf in your log. And as you saw through, because the spine of the saw is thinner, you're not going to experience any drag. So definitely keep an eye out for vintage crosscut saws. With those vintage crosscut saws, also keep an eye out for crosscut saw handles. Now, thankfully, you can purchase modern iterations of these handles, but keep an eye out for these handles, yard sales, eBay. You actually can manufacture your own handles too. I believe I have a video on how I manufactured a modern set of handles for my crosscut saws, but just something to keep an eye out for and start collecting. Now, two-man crosscut saws are the tool to have for felling and bucking larger logs. However, if you have smaller logs that perhaps are 12 inches in diameter and smaller, I'd recommend looking for a 36-inch single-man saw. And these are really nice for those smaller logs where you don't want to break out one of these larger two-man saws. The good ones have a place to position a helper handle on the top of the blade, and it's actually really comfortable and ergonomic to work one of these 36-inch long saws. So keep an eye out for one of these as well. Forgot to mention another cool feature about this 36-inch saw. There's actually a hole for a second helper handle at the end of this saw. So if you have some smaller helpers, you could put one on either side of this saw and it could go to work, help you out. Now, having a variety of crosscut saws, 2-man and single man, and a variety of handles is awesome because that gives us the ability to fell and buck lumber without the use and dependency of gasoline and electronics. However, what good are these saws if they are not sharp, if they are not cutting well? And that brings us on to the next tool I recommend you start looking for, hunting for. And that's going to be a crosscut saw sharpening tool. This one is about 150 years old and it's one of my most prized possessions. This is made by Simmons Saw and Steel Company. This is a model number 342. I'm not sure if they make modern iterations on this tool. If they do, I will do some research and I'll try and leave a link for one in the description down below. Now, unfortunately, sharpening these crosscut saws is becoming a bit of a lost art because nobody's really doing it anymore, because why should you, right? We have the chainsaw, right? Depend on that thing. Well, I actually have a crosscut saw restoration series in which I go over the use of this tool, how to swage the teeth, the height of the raker's teeth, how to sharpen the cutter teeth, all things of that nature. It's an older video, 4-part series. It starts with how to restore a crosscut saw part 1. But if you're interested, definitely worth something checking out. I'm sure you will learn a lot from that series. Now, if you are successful in your hunt for finding a crosscut saw filing tool, with that tool you're going to want to keep a few things. A spider gauge, which you can use to check the set on your cutter teeth. You're going to want to have an adjustable wrench. That way you could change the set on your cutter teeth. Also, you want a hammer, small head hammer, and that's for swaging the raker teeth. Additionally, you're definitely going to want to carry a good flat file and a good triangular file. So we've gotten to the point where we've taken down that tree and we've bucked it up either to firewood lengths, maybe 16 inches, or maybe 8 or 10 foot logs that we want to turn into lumber or beams. Now, how do we turn that log into firewood or beams without the use of gasoline or electronics? Well, that's where the hand tools come in, the axes, hatchets, broadhead axe. So, what do I think you should carry? Well, to start, you're definitely going to want a good 36-inch axe. I forget what this one is. This might be a Collins Legitimus axe. I rehung the handle on this a while back. It's also a good idea to have a couple extra axe head handles because when you can't order them anymore, you're either going to have to make them or you're going to be SOL. So definitely a good 36-inch axe. Additionally, you're going to want to have a splitting maul, right? Because if you want to make firewood, the best way to split those large rounds is a maul. Now, I had a shoulder injury a while back, so I really don't swing the maul much anymore. I really rely on a splitter. But if it came down to it, you know, I could swing this and I'd do what I had to do. Additionally, a hatchet. Just a simple hatchet for making kindling and maybe knocking off a few smaller branches off a log. Great to have a little hatchet around. The other thing I'd recommend you looking out for that I have been unable to secure is something called a hewing axe, which a hewing axe is a broadhead axe, and if you find the really good ones, the handle is actually offset. And a hewing axe is designed to help you shape a log into a beam. So I think typically what people would have done in the past, you know, you have a big log, you try and square it up, right? So you'd start by taking an axe and chopping at 45-degree angles, and you try and get it to like a rough square shape. And then from there, you take your hewing axe and then you'd clean everything up. That is also a bit of a lost art because once the sawmill was invented, why would people bother spending their time squaring up these logs by hand? But definitely an offset hewing axe, specialized tool, something to keep an eye out for. So we have all these nice hand-hewn beams that we're ready to start constructing a structure with. The question is, how are we going to fasten those beams together? You're not going to be able to go to the hardware store anymore. Hopefully you've been hoarding some hardware over the years, but if all else fails, we're going to have to revert to how we used to manufacture structures, which is post and beam with wooden dowels. You know, you're going to have mortise and tenon joints, and you're going to have to drill a hole and then pound some wooden pegs through and lock everything together. That is also a bit of a lost art. There's some guys that still do it. I really should get a book on it and learn more about it. But the question is, how are we going to drill holes through those beams? Well, what you're going to want to pick up is a couple of manual drills. This is a smaller one, good for smaller holes, need some oil. And then I have a larger one. This one's nice because it has a shoulder rest, so you could apply a lot of shoulder pressure on the tool, stabilization handle, and this would be fantastic So we'll also need some oil. But this would be fantastic for drilling those holes into those beams. Drill bits. Keep an eye out for these large wood auger bits. You know, I'm always finding these old, large auger drill bits in the bottom of old toolboxes at garage sales and estate sales, and people don't want them. You know, they want those modern spade bits. So you definitely can pick good, heavy-duty wood auger bits up for a very low cost if you really keep an eye out for them at garage sales. Some other tools I'd like to add to this kit that I don't currently have on the table. For one, a fine-tooth carpentry saw, and that's going to be critical for sawing in our mortise and tenon joints into our hand-hewn beams. Additionally, a variety of chisels, especially wide chisels. You know, 2-inch, 3-inch chisels. Probably 2-inch would be fairly good, but you know, you'd want a 2-inch wide chisel with a very long handle, some hammers. Some final things I'd like to add: drafting equipment. Right, so like a carpentry square, levels, plumb bob, right, because our electronic laser level, well, that's not going to function anymore. And then carpentry pencils, right, because we're going to need a way to mark everything and scribe everything. Well, I think I've rambled on long enough here. I think I've given you plenty of things to think about. I think I've given you a lot of ideas as to what you may want to start collecting and hunting for at garage sales, estate sales, eBay, your grandparents' basement. But I ask you now, are there any tools or pieces of equipment you think I should consider adding to this end of civilization lumber production kit? Let me know in the comments section down below. You know, I think we're building a great community here. We share a lot of ideas and values, and I'd like to thank you for being a part of it. Once again, I would like to thank you for watching, and as always, I will catch you on the next one.